Welcome to the Chase Hudson Show, a podcast dedicated to inspiring you to become extraordinary. Each week, we sit down with top-tier business owners, real estate investors, and influencers to inspire you to build your legacy. It's time to level up. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Chase Hudson Show. Today we have Jeremy Andrus, the president and CEO of Traeger Grills. This is such a fascinating episode. Jeremy was fundamental, pivotal in the founding of Skullcandy, which is a household name throughout the country in the headphones and electronic space, and then subsequently went on to take over and acquire Traeger and build that into what it is today. Incredible insights. We talk about his ability to run and execute a business, taking companies public, his habits. So really excited for you guys to hear this one. And with that, let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of the Chase Hudson Show. Today we have Jeremy Andrus, who is the president and CEO of Traeger Grills, the original wood pellet grill brand that has taken the outdoor cooking world by storm. He and his financial partner acquired the company in 2014, transforming it from a small regional 26-year-old business into a multi-$100 million brand. Prior to Traeger, Jeremy was CEO of Skullcandy, the headphone and wearable electronic brand, which he helped grow into a $300 million company. Jeremy was named EY Entrepreneur of the Year in 2016 and holds an MBA from Harvard. So with that, welcome in, Jeremy.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time.
Happy to do it,
I'm excited. I mean, obviously the Traeger brand, the Skullcandy brand, a couple of massive names here in our market and the country. And so I'm a huge fan of your products. I utilize your products. So to have you here, it's pretty awesome.
It's awesome.
So, well, first thing I typically ask my guests, Jeremy, is to talk a little bit about your upbringing. So, childhood or teenage years, maybe some insights to help us understand who you are today.
Yeah. Happy to. So I kind of lived all over the world growing up, but I would say the formative period was living in the Midwest in Minnesota, small town, until I was about 11 years old. And my, we were lower middle income as family. My dad was, he became a successful entrepreneur, but not till after I graduated and left high school for college. And so it was during a period where we didn't have a lot of resources as a family. I remember early on in Minnesota, we didn't have a garage to park our cars in. My dad had this old Datsun. And on some of the colder nights, he would disconnect the battery and bring it to the mudroom because it was so cold.
Wow.
That's the same environment that I got a paper route when I was 7 years old. And so my sister was a year and a half older than me. And I just sort of grew up doing gritty, hard things. And I didn't know the word gritty. And were they hard? I don't know. It's just what I grew up doing. And I had to earn my money. And I remember buying my first pair of Nike shoes. There's no way my parents were buying Nike for me. Like I was getting the super cheap Payless, whatever the brand, the retailer was. And so, I was delivering papers at 4 a.m. in frigid Minneapolis, Minnesota weather. I bought a lawnmower when I was 8 or 9 years old and started a lawn business. And I've cut thousands and thousands of lawns in my life. And that's sort of, I was always an entrepreneur. I had one job that I worked for an hourly wage. And I just thought it was such a waste of money. So I was always finding ways to make money, save for my future. And, but it was like growing up in a very industrious family where we worked hard. We had a garden, we weeded, we cut the lawn. I mean, it's like I was raised very differently than I'm trying to raise my children in a similar way. But like growing up doing gritty things, I think that just set the stage for some of the hard things that I would go through. And, part of it's just DNA, part of it's who I am, but part of it's definitely out of necessity. And it's just the environment that I was raised in.
Yeah, I love it. It sounds like some really good experiences, and you're trying to, replicate a little bit of that with your children.
Trying to?
Yeah.
It's hard to fake being poor. Like we tried that for a long time.
Yeah.
And then we finally laid down the law and said, you guys are poor. We're not. You are. You got to make your money. You got to deliver the grades. You got to get a job. And so, Yeah, it's been an adventure as a parent, very different than my upbringing.
Yeah. So about how old are your kids ranging from age?
We have 6 kids, 8 years apart.
Okay.
They're between 7 and 15 years old.
Got it. Yeah. So good spectrum. And I've had a couple guests that have had similar experiences where they've made money, they didn't grow up with money, and they're trying to instill those same attributes and habits. It's a difficult thing to balance.
Hard. It's hard. It's hard partly because it's so easy, like the path of least resistance is to give them what they want.
Right.
Path of least resistance is to do the work or hire out the work. It takes time to teach them to do the work, to follow up, to do it right, to do it well. And more and more I realize that you get to a point as a parent where you've had more success than you need, and the next increment of success in your life just doesn't matter. And you have to start to be more sort of intentional around spending the time to ensure that they know how to do things the right way. They know how to do hard things as well.
Yeah, I love it. Well, transitioning from childhood and teenage years, I saw you went to BYU. Maybe tell us a little bit about your college experience. So, having those experiences as a teenager, working hard, what was your thought process going into school? Did you want to, get a degree and go get a job, go be an entrepreneur, start a business? What was the mindset?
You know what? There were two places I applied to school. I applied to BYU and the Naval Academy, and I only got into one of those. I lived in Maryland at the time, and it was hard to get in. And I was, I knew a little. I'd spent time in Annapolis. I knew some people that had gone there, and I was really sort of like impressed and maybe enamored by the level of discipline and leadership that's learned in the Naval Academy. And, I went on later on to go to Harvard Business School and got to know some Navy SEALs and Army Rangers and just really admired them as leaders and how disciplined they were in doing things. And so, but I ended up at BYU. That was the second place I applied because I grew up a BYU football fan. Never living in Utah, but loving college football. And, first game I went to, number 1 team in the country comes to town. I'm a freshman. We upset them. And I'm like, this is what college is all about. Turns out that it doesn't happen that often.
Right.
But my experience was, I would say it took me a while to get used to BYU. As culturally, I'd grown up outside of Utah. And so, but I really, really was focused on academics. I ended up making good friends, but I had a few years where, I just spent 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day in the library. And I wanted to make sure that I got A's. Like getting an A- just pissed me off in all of my classes. So I was a very, very focused student. I did the same at Harvard Business School, but I always had a desire to be a business leader. I look back now and sort of understand that differently. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't know that word. And I actually didn't know the difference between, from an aptitude and an interest perspective, becoming a CEO, grinding my way up some Fortune 50 company as opposed to starting something myself. But I knew I wanted to be a business leader. So I studied economics and political science and eventually just went out and worked for a while and went to business school. But my college experience was, like a lot of things that I did earlier in my life, probably a little bit too intense, probably a little bit too focused. I actually look back and, all of my friends at BYU and Harvard were out having this great time. And I was just very serious about life. If I could do it over again, I would have lightened up a little bit.
Yeah. And I was kind of the same way. It's tough when you're in that environment where so much depends on grades and your job and the placement and all that to, when coming into your later years back up and realize like, well, maybe I should have gone to a few more football games
totally.
or,
No, look, now football games I didn't miss.
Okay.
But you know what? It was, and again, it's easy to say that in hindsight. And some of these things are actually real lessons in hindsight. And sometimes I'll say that and someone will say, but look where it got you.
Right.
I'm really happy where you are right now. So I was always, for a long time, willing to make sacrifices sacrifices or investments for the future. Like over time, I don't begrudge any of those, but I've also gotten to a point where I don't mind doing hard things, but there is no future. Like the future is now. And so I don't want to sacrifice every day for some future. I kind of want to live life and enjoy. And that's just always it's a balancing act. How much are you investing to have a better experience in life? And how much are you saying the grass beneath my feet is like the greenest grass? I'm going to enjoy it.
Yeah, I love that. Love that advice. It's a tough thing to do, but something that I've heard with guests on the show is enjoy the journey, enjoy where you are, take the time to just, soak it in while you can.
That's all you got.
Yeah, I love it. Well, so you graduated from BYU. I saw that you spent some time with Monitor Company, Monitor Deloitte, and then after Harvard, you worked with Kimpton Hotels. Was there anything, with those first few jobs that, it triggered you to like say, hey, I want to be a CEO. I want to do this or do that. Maybe one or two experiences or takeaways from that early career.
Well, I would just say you haven't mentioned like a third of my early career. I was all over the place, I day traded stocks full time for 6-8 months.
Wow.
Turned my lawn mowing money, $50,000 into $2.5 million in my mid 20s. And this won $2.5 million. It was just worth more back then. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I subsequently lost all of it, plus $200,000 of margin debt that took me 10 years to pay off. So I day traded stocks. Horrible experience. I loved it on the way up, and it crushed me on the way down. So there were a lot of lessons in that experience that I took away from it. I was a management consultant. I didn't like it. I probably wasn't very good. It just felt too passive and hands-off. It was analysis, but there was no ownership. But I learned a lot from it. I did a summer in investment banking in London. I spent time at TaylorMade Golf. I built hotels. I built limited service Marriott franchise hotels. And so, you try and find the common denominator, and there really isn't one other than every experience had some things that I enjoyed, had things that I didn't enjoy, but there were lessons that I took away from all of them. And if you sort of look at the logos side by side, it looks like I bounced around a lot, and they were very, very different. Real estate development came after day trading stocks. One's building this real asset, and it takes years and years, and the other's like logging on and creating no value whatsoever, just getting in between trades. And there was so much that I learned. There were moments of frustration where I sort of asked myself, am I going nowhere? Am I spinning my wheels? I haven't found my passion. You look at my resume and you'd say unfocused, not very successful, but I was working hard. And I look back and realize there was so much value to the journey that I went on. And it took me 10 years to really find what I wanted to do. I found my co-founder of Skullcandy. It was a small business, a few guys. And I found a love in brand, in product innovation, in consumer durables, design and development, in manufacturing. And, that was the beginning of what's now been, that was early 2004. It's been a 19-year journey. 2 companies, 2 brands, both sort of long stints. And I'm now almost 10 years into Traeger. It took me a long time to find my path. And at the time, it was deeply painful for me because I really cared about being successful. But when I found the path, it's been hard, it's been bumpy, but I've loved it.
Yeah, that's great. How old were you when you joined Skullcandy, when you kind of figured out what you wanted to do?
32 years
32.
old.
Okay.
Just after business school.
Yeah. And I like that because I think today's day and age, social media and just younger people, they feel like they have to have it figured out, when they're 20 or know their path and go. And so, you say, you bounced around, but I'm sure it was all, very additive to who you are and what you brought to Skullcandy and Traeger.
I would not be where I am had I not been opportunistic.
Yeah.
And which is interesting because I'm a fairly methodical person. I started my career with a plan. I was going to be a management consultant. I was going to learn a lot about different businesses. I was going to get good analysis, blah, 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 blah. And I got 6 months into it and I said, there's nothing, I'm going to learn from this, but this has nothing to do with my future. And so for the very first time, I quit a job. I started day trading stocks. I mean, like I became opportunistic, and in the opportunism, I bounced around, but had these real deep lessons in introspection. And I'm really glad that I didn't just stick to my strategy. I would have ended up in a just perfectly fine place, but it's allowed me to find real fulfillment till I actually truly love what I do.
I love it. That's great. So diving in a little bit to Skullcandy, you're joining the startup. Sounds like a few of you, very new business. Maybe walk us through your tenure there, high level. What was it like building a brand? I mean, headphones, I feel like you guys are revolutionary at the time, even now, right? With what you were doing, what you're putting out. So yeah, I would love to hear kind of high level your journey at Skullcandy.
You know what? Skullcandy was the greatest platform for my career, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity that I had there. I was actually thinking about this as I was driving over because I'm having dinner with the CEO of Skullcandy tonight. Oh, great! He's been on board 6 months, and if I were to be honest, I've got this mix of like real sort of love and passion and endearment towards Skullcandy, and I feel a lot of PTSD when I think about it. It was a hard road for me, and that's not complaining because it was the best thing that happened to me, but I feel a little bit of anxiety when I think about some of those moments. I joined Rick Alden, who he had founded the business about a year before. I joined him. It was doing $500,000 in revenue. They hadn't really decided who they were going to be. So we had, it was mostly wearable electronics initially. It was speakers and mobile phone capabilities in a snowboard helmet. And then we integrated into jackets and sneaker bags and stuff like that, just wearable electronics. We eventually became a headphone company. And I was not classically trained to do that. I mean, before that, I came from Kimpton Hotels and Restaurants. I was doing real estate acquisition development. Before that, I was day trading stocks, building hotels, management consulting. There was nothing that I did to qualify me to go to Skullcandy other than I had a resume, a degree, an MBA from Harvard Business School, and I was willing to work for equity only for a few years. And so, but it was a learning, it was a discovery. I remember going to China for the first time, and we bought one-way tickets because we didn't know when we were coming home. And we came home 2.5 weeks later, but we trekked around China looking for factories and going to the Hong Kong Electronics Show. And so we were spinning our wheels. We didn't really know it, but we were learning. And I look back now and say, how did we do it? I mean, like, we built this business on $800,000 of equity, literally 25, 50 grand at a pop from friends and family.
Wow.
And, but it was an exciting ride. I mean, I went to China 30 times and, found myself in the Middle East and in Europe, sitting with very, very prestigious private equity funds, sitting in meetings with guys like Snoop Dogg and Jay-Z. I mean, it was a ride that I couldn't have made up, but I found my passion, I would say first and foremost in building. Like, I love building, passion in brand. And so it really unlocked something that I wouldn't have ever found in a classroom, in a case study, in a book. I jumped into the startup with no capability whatsoever and kind of figured it out along the way.
I love it. So I like to go into the weeds a little bit on kind of fundraising and investors within companies. So 800,000, you sounds like you raised from friends and family and grew that. Along the way, how did you guys think about, private equity or raising more capital? Did you have to raise more capital? And yeah, how did that shake out?
So it's a good question. Initially, and I didn't understand this. I remember pitching. I joined the company as a VP of operations, and I found myself raising capital. And wrote a business plan, sat with dozens of investors, and the answer was no, 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 no. And I didn't really understand it. I actually understood they were smart investors to turn it down. Now, it turns out we got lucky and we did something right, but they looked and they said, consumer electronics is a terrible place to invest. Like, it's impossible to make money in consumer electronics. They said, you've got this terrible working capital model where you got to buy product, you sell it to retailers, you get paid long after your retailer pays you. sorry, you get paid long after you've had to pay the factory. And as a young entrepreneur, you just believe you're going to succeed. And I look back now and say, I couldn't do it again with those resources. Like there was some element of capturing lightning in a bottle. It was the right brand at the right time. We did a lot of things well, but it still shouldn't have succeeded. We had a little bit of equity and a lot of sort of really high interest revolving debt. And so I sat with venture funds, and they said, no one really invests in this space. And eventually my dad, my brother, my uncle, a local investor, a guy named Greg Warnock, he put in 150 grand. And we just sort of over the course of the year raised about 800 grand. Down the road, when we started, I mean, we had incredible margins. It was a great business. It was like generating a lot of cash. There were lots of opportunities to raise private equity, and we did on a couple of occasions, but we didn't really need it. They were much more liquidity rounds.
Yep.
And in that process, I actually really enjoy the transaction process. I'm an operator at heart, but you have a few of these moments along the way where you get a chance to sit in front of really great investors and hear their admiration for your business. And I would never do it full time. Like I would never be that's what investment bankers and private equity guys do. But when you've built an asset and you're so proud of it, every 3, 4, 5 years to get a chance to pitch great funds and negotiate and structure a deal, it's very satisfying.
Yeah, that's great. I love the insight. So what was your succession like out of Skullcandy? Like how did you make that transition from Skullcandy to Traeger? Was it a liquidity event for you? Did you say, hey, I'm going to, transition to a new head? Well, what was that like in the thought process there?
So that was a very hard thing for me. So I was 6 years there from startup to taking the company public. And I'm a young CEO. We take Skullcandy public. We are the highest shorted stock on the NASDAQ. For 6 months, out of 4,200 companies on the exchange,
wow,
we are the highest shorted stock. Like, in simple terms, it just means that people were betting against me and my brand more than any other company on the exchange. And that was a hard couple of years for me. I mean, like, it was deeply painful. I wasn't ready to be a CEO, let alone a publicly traded CEO. And then I look back and I say, Skullcandy had no business being public. We were too small. We were this accessory made for a 14 to 24-year-old irreverent kid who that attaches to a device that we didn't control. It's like, I don't know what our private equity fund was thinking, and I went along with it. It was a great ride. Great 2-week process taking a business public, and then it sucked for 2 years. And I really wanted to go buy another business. So I left. My partner came back in as CEO, Rick Alden, came back from the board for a couple of months until I found a new CEO. And I set out to find a business. And I looked at everything. I mean, I was back at MIT looking at technology from their media lab, from MIT's media lab. I looked at hundreds of pitch books. I talked to lots of private equity funds. I actually invested in 15 private equity funds who did consumer growth equity, thinking that I could expand my deal flow to like every single fund that sees deals. And so I spent a year, and I eventually found this business called Traeger. And I actually found it 5 or 6 months into my search. And I looked at it and I scratched my head. It was actually a private equity fund that called me on it. And it felt like a really weird business. I didn't love outdoor cooking. We owned a Weber grill, which I thought was perfectly fine. I'd never heard of Traeger. I had no idea what a wood pellet grill was. So I looked, pretty quickly passed. 4 or 5 months later, the private equity fund reached back out to me and said, hey, we really like this business. We think there's something to do. And at that point, I'm like 8, 9 months in my search process. I haven't found what I wanted. I'm anxious to get moving. I loved that year. I mean, like it was an opportunity for me to go from like single guy living in my parents' basement as I co-founded Skullcandy. I got married, had kids, And it was like this blur. It went so fast. It was 7 days a week, 150 nights a year on the road. And so I had this opportunity to sort of step back and get to know my 3 daughters and my wife. And it was an incredible year. We traveled, but there came a moment where I said, I can't do this forever. Like I can't take my 4-year-old and get kids Diet Cokes every day at noon.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to lose, like, I love her to death, but I need something to do. And so when I actually dug into Traeger, I said, this is definitely not what I was looking for. It was a 27-year-old brand in the Pacific Northwest. Turns out it was like all sorts of dysfunctional. Like, it was a deeply painful first year there. But I fell in love with it. I fell in love with Traeger 24 hours into talking to consumers. And it's like hook, line, and sinker. It's like, this is pure magic. And I also had this realization that we got lucky at Skullcandy. Startups, it's a little bit of luck. Some people are better entrepreneurs than others. We got lucky. And we did everything right that we knew, but we got lucky. And so I had this appreciation for the sort of, I'll say, the synchronicity or timing or magic that it takes to really find product market fit or sort of brand consumer fit. And I didn't really believe, as I thought about other startup opportunities, that was the right place to invest. But I found this wood pellet grill thing that every consumer I talked to said, like, this thing saved my life. It's the best thing in my family's lives. And so it motivated me to buy a 27-year-old brand and rebuild it.
I love it. So again, going back to kind of the acquisition and raising capital. So here you are, you've had a lot of success with Skullcandy, taking a year to find a company. Once you know Traeger's the one for you, how did you go about acquiring the business? Did you do that with partners? Was it just you? Did you raise capital? What was that like?
So I did it with Trilantic Capital Partners. I knew them through Skullcandy. They considered an investment in that brand. And we bought a minority share in the business. We bought about 48% of the business. The Andrus family wrote an uncomfortably large check. We'd made money at Skullcandy, and we were willing to lose a lot of it in this wood pellet grill business. My wife, by the way, is so supportive. Like, she is along for the ride. And not everyone would be that way, but we were finally financially secure. And I said, okay, let's bet it on this thing. And she said, all right, let's go. And we did, and it was a disaster. I mean, like, we bought 48% of this business, and it was a freaking train wreck. I got on the inside and realized, number one, that the guy that owned 52% was how can I say this, like, kindly? He was a difficult human being, just a difficult guy. He's not a bad guy. Thought he was a bad guy for a little while, but he was this very successful entrepreneur. I was actually, like, very impressed by his background. This guy bought a bank when he was like 19 or 20 years old in South Florida. He moved to Hollywood and founded or produced movies like Fugitive, Terminator, Sophie's Choice. He founded Planet Hollywood. Like, wow. Super interesting entrepreneur, but one of the most challenging people I've ever worked with. The most challenging person I've ever worked with. Not even close. And we got a few months into this, and I just realized the business was operationally dysfunctional. It was culturally toxic. It was a horrible place. I hated showing up to it. And I want to qualify that by saying there are members of that team that left after we bought the rest of the business whom I'm in touch with, and they've reached out as they've heard me tell this story on podcasts. And they've actually expressed some real disappointment in me for telling my side of the story. And my reaction to that is, they were good people. The owner was a bad fit. The culture was a terrible culture. There were good people. They've become my friends, some of them. But it wasn't working for me. Like, I applaud them for what they built. But either I needed to leave or we needed to buy the rest of the business, because there was no way in the world I was going to continue to work for this guy. And we bought the rest of the business. It took us 6 more months. And I shouldn't say that. It just blew up. Like, I remember I was in New York. I went back for the first board meeting with the owner of the business, the majority owner, with Trilantic, and with a member of my management team. And we had the most confrontational, awkward, uncomfortable meeting I've ever sat in. Like, it went on for 4 hours.
Wow.
And I'll never forget, like, the closing line of this. I'd spent like so much time building a 100-page deck on why I thought the business was in trouble. It was dysfunctional, it was toxic. And the owner doesn't really say much. He's like glaring at me this whole meeting. And he stands up at the end and he says, I disagree with every effing word on every effing slide in this entire effing deck. And at this point, I know it's over. And I'm just thinking, why didn't you say something? Everyone left the room, and like the meeting was over, and I put my backpack on to walk out. And this guy, Keith, says, Jeremy, can we talk? And I'm like, no, please don't make me stay and talk. And we sat down and we had a super awkward conversation. This like conference room table that would accommodate 20 people, and we're sitting next to each other, chairs turned to each other, knees touching. And I back up a little bit, he moves forward a little bit. And it was like it was just one of the more bizarre conversations I've had in my life. And I just want to say, I've since reconciled with this guy.
Good.
8 years later, he reached out to me, and we just decided that it wasn't going to work. And 30 days later, we had a deal done. And so it was hard. I mean, like, and there's been moments since that have been hard, but the journey has been just awesome. It's like, if I'm going to work, and I don't work for resume, I don't work for career, I work because there are certain things about building business that I'm very passionate about. It's just like, it's a pleasure for me to be a part of. I just love it every day now.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's always very interesting to hear the insight and the negotiations and how those are structured. And so it sounds like 2015-ish, you kind of bought it outright.
Mid 2014.
Mid 2014.
June
okay.
of 2014.
So
yeah.
you're 100% owner with Trilantic.
Yep.
You guys are now on your way. So from 2014 to I guess, and we talked a little bit before we started recording about where you are today, but maybe from 2014 to kind of COVID, what was that like for you guys?
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting. I speak to business schools, or I have just conversations. People reach out on LinkedIn, and oftentimes I hear this sentiment of, "Wow, what a great career." It's almost like, boy, what a smooth. Like, you make it look so easy, and I'm just thinking, what are you talking about? Like, this has been. I can't imagine a bumpier moment from there to here. From the beginning of my career, but also from like January 17th, the day I walked into Traeger in 2014, it's been a roller coaster. And there were some hard years, but we had really nice growth. After the majority owner left, we rebuilt the business. It didn't grow a lot the first year or two, but we did some things that were right for the business, and it really started to grow. And so in late 2000, the fall of 2017, we recapitalized the business. We sold 2/3 of it. Trilantic and I got a phenomenal return. We both rolled into the new deal. We brought in 2 private equity funds, one called AEA and the other called Ontario Teachers. AEA led this deal. I was so committed to finding great partners, because as an entrepreneur, if you take capital from the wrong person, the wrong group, you can end up with very dysfunctional and toxic partnerships. You end up having a boss, not a partner. And so I worked really hard. Trilantic I believed in, and they turned out to be the world's best partners. These other 2 partners, all 3 of them are still on the board at Traeger. And we just had a wonderful partnership. And it hasn't been smooth. We've had a couple of really difficult moments. You know, we took this business public in the summer of 21, and then literally within 30 days, supply chains start melting down. We manufacture in Asia. Transportation costs go up by 10, 15 times. So we go public, our business, our stock races were worth $4 billion. And then, my gosh, 10 months later, we're worth 10% of that. So it's been a roller coaster, and there have been really hard moments to work through. And I would say a couple of things. One, when the chips are down and you're going through something hard, having a true partner who wants you to succeed. Of course they want to succeed, but they want you and the team to succeed. They're willing to grind through hard things is critical. Like I have so much commitment and loyalty to these three partners. But the other is that nothing is smooth up and to the right. There are moments where you feel like you can do no wrong, and there are moments where you feel like you could do no right. And I would say 2022, not the worst, it was the hardest year of my career. It was so painfully difficult that, and it's particularly hard when you've had a lot of success, you've been white hot for years, and then suddenly everything is crashing down. Too much leverage, too much inventory on the balance sheet, margins are getting crushed. Consumers had been buying everything during the pandemic, and they started saying, we're not buying anything else, we're traveling. And so it got really challenging, and I sort of got 6 months into, waking up and looking in the mirror every day and just saying, I'm miserable. This is painful. I don't know how to fix this. Like this, the macro headwinds were so strong. And I eventually got to this point where I said, this is the golden moment in my life. I'm in the best shape of my life. My kids are they're amazing. We don't have teenage problems yet. Got a great marriage, great family, but I'm waking up miserable every day. And it was this deep soul searching moment of figuring out, how do you go through hard things, not hate the moment, and really have some vision for who you can become by going through it. As opposed to, and I gotta tell you, I look back on all of the hard moments in my life, business and otherwise, and I say that I'm better because I went through that. I'm stronger, but I never say anything but freaking hated going through it. But I found this moment, in the depth of the moment, figuring out how to reorient my perspective and think about how intriguing, how motivating, how interesting, how much stronger I could become if I made it beyond it. And it's interesting because I feel like I've been through so much in my career, but I hadn't been through that. And I look back and say, I'm so much better, not because I got through something hard, but because I finally in my life, I figured out, how do I embrace adversity and be happy while I'm going through it, as opposed to misery and eventually finding peace.
I love it. And I resonate with that too. I mentioned before we started recording, we're trying to get a business off the ground. And in the midst of that stress and struggle and checking bank accounts and how are we going to get through this to have the tenacity and just the vision to still be happy and still show up and just get through it. So
the journey
so good.
Matters.
Yeah.
It's I have had a few moments that felt like destination moments. And I remember the first one. It's when I became CEO of Skullcandy. I was the junior partner with Rick Alden. And I remember I was at an international sales meeting in Prague. And I remember the moment where the board called me and said, you're the CEO now. And it was this incredible rush. It was this great destination moment. And then I woke up the next morning and I sort of said, all right, well, it doesn't feel like I've arrived. It doesn't feel any different. And I had this very strong realization that there is no destination. There is only a journey. You can only choose to enjoy all of the moments. Some of them are hard, but I think on balance, you've got to find more days that leave you feeling full and satisfied. Otherwise, why do the journey?
Yeah, love it, Jeremy. So what's next for you? I mean, sounds like obviously tons of success through Skullcandy, through Traeger. Sounds like you've kind of gone through some stormy waters with Traeger, but you're on the other side of that. So what do the next 5 to 10 years look like for you?
So I can't answer that question, but I'll tell you how I think about the future. Number one, every day I wake up and I love Traeger. Like, I get excited to go in, and I've got, like, some of my early partners have left, and some have retired, some have gone on to do other things, and they say, why are you still here? Like, why are you still there? And I would say, I have a lot of love, not only for Traeger, but I have a lot of love for the team and for being on a team. I wasn't a very good CEO at Skullcandy. Like, I'm painfully aware of that, and I really wasn't ready for it, and I had a lot to learn. And, like, I'm not naturally good at certain things that a CEO has to do. And so there was a lot for me to learn. It's part of the reason why I went back to do it a second time. But besides building business, I really have energy for creating an environment that helps people unlock their best selves, for building a culture that inspires people to be better. You know, I fundamentally believe that the most important thing a leader does is help someone become a better human being, help them develop a skill, a capability, a level of confidence, fulfillment, mission, accomplishment. And so I really find joy in doing that every day. I'm not done at Skullcandy. Like, I believe in this business. I'm sorry, Traeger. I am done at Skullcandy. I
was going to ask her, if you still have a role at Skullcandy at all. But
I have no role at Skullcandy.
Okay.
No, not done with Traeger. And I'm enjoying it every day. And I want to become a better business leader. I want to have positive impact on my team. And so that really drives me. Whereas early on, I was driven by success. I wanted to be successful, quote unquote. I wanted to make money. And then I got to a point where I realized my career was more than I'd ever hoped for. Our family doesn't spend a lot of money, so we don't need any more money. But I want to be a good leader. There are other things that I think about in terms of, like, what does Jeremy 2.0 look like? How does the Andrus family do more good in the community? My wife, by the way, she is incredible. And I am envious of her energy, her ability to, she's just productive. Like, she just gets stuff done faster than any human being I know. And she is really, we're raising 6 children, but we got to a point where kids are going to school, and she said she found a passion for serving in the community. And it's really started in one place, and it's evolved, and she's doing a lot of good. And I am very supportive and, like, very happy for her, happy for our family that we get to ride her coattails in this, and really have a belief that over time, you know, I'll go from selling things, like I've just been selling things for the last 20 years, headphones, you know, grills, you name it, to focusing more on doing positive things with the time and the resources that we've had. And I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I think a lot about the transition is not going to be easy, because for my whole life I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and now I got to figure out what's next. And to be clear, it's not going to happen anytime soon, but I think these things over time, I really want our family to figure out how we give back more to this community. And part of it's just that, you know, I came to Utah. You know, I left my college furniture in my apartment in San Francisco, called my landlord and asked if he would take it away from my deposit, which he's like, no problem, I got it. I drove my Ford Explorer to my parents' basement in Park City, and somehow, you know, 19 years later, I have a wife and 6 kids, a lot of friends, and just a career that just became, like, it was just like a really great journey and experience. And it makes me and it makes our family want to give back to a community that I feel like has supported us tremendously.
Yeah, so good. I love that as a next chapter, and kind of discovering more of the giving back and fulfillment. It's great. Last couple questions here, we wrap up. I'm curious if there are any habits that you live by, or, you know, things that you do on a weekly or annual basis. I mean, you think about, you know, CEO of Traeger, CEO of Skullcandy, he's got to be doing something, but I don't know if there's anything you can attribute, like, you know, things that you like to do or read, yes, or whatever.
Boy, that's a good question. I would say there are 2 habits, or 2 one's a habit and one's a little bit more of a concept. So I read a book. I was setting goals since I was a kid. Like every Sunday I'd sit on my parents' bed, we'd review my goals, my monthly, weekly, annual goals. And I read this book called Mini Habits. There's another book called Atomic Habits that people have, so that's probably more famous. And it really describes success and sort of the power and confidence of an individual as related much more to habits that they do every day than goals that they set and accomplish. Most people actually don't accomplish their New Year's resolutions. And so there are, my habits revolve around my routine, and I do them almost every day, certainly Monday through Saturday. And they give me confidence. You know, I wake up at 5. I've become an early morning person, and I have this incredible hour between 5 and 6 where, you know, I have a 32-ounce hot water, and I sit in the dark and I think and I listen and I meditate. Sometimes I'm listening to something on my iPhone, but I do all of this before I unlock my phone, because I found when I unlock my phone and I read the journal and I look at my Domo to see how Traeger's doing, I respond to texts, I have noise in my mind that doesn't stop until I go to bed. So that first hour of like introspection and soul search is important to me. I work out hard from 6 to 7:30. I go home and I wake up my kids. During the school year, I take them to school. It's like the best 15 minutes of my day. I drink a protein shake, which has all of the physical nutrients I need. And then my day just gets insane from 8:30 to 6:30. I go home, I put my phone in a cupboard. I spend 3 hours with my family, put the kids to bed, and I hop back online. And I do it every day. And that allows me to enjoy, it allows me to put some structure in a chaotic life. The second thing that I do that I absolutely love is I listen to a lot of books. And, you know, unfortunately, I don't read because I don't have time, and like I just can't keep my eyes awake when my head hits the pillow. I'm like 30 seconds and I'm out. But I listen to books wherever I have an opportunity, on my workouts, on my drives, and I don't listen to fiction. I love it. If I'm on vacation, I may read a book, but I'm always listening to a book that is relevant to something that I'm going through or something that I aspire to learn about. If I were to go back to last year, you know, I remember listening to David Goggins. I remember listening to Brene Brown, right? In what was the book? It wasn't Rising Strong. That's Arthur Brooks. Doesn't matter. On how you get through hard things. And right now I'm listening to books on storytelling and leadership and culture building. And so I find that there's so much wisdom out there. I don't need to reinvent any of it. You can't read it all, but if you read what's relevant from a context perspective around what you're going through, you can truly absorb and get better. And so those are two things that I just like. It's just part of my life, and it gives me confidence. And I'm a learner. Like, why do I do this still? Because I'm learning every day. You know, 2022, I learned more than all of the years of my career combined. Wow. And so these things allow me some structure around learning. Yeah, love it. Well, really, there's no better way to end, Jeremy. I seriously appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to sit here and share your story. So happy to do it. Thank you for being here. Appreciate the time. Chase. Thanks for listening to The Chase Hudson Show. If you liked what you heard, please leave me a review and subscribe to this podcast. Reviews really help us to find better guests and to improve the overall quality of the show. If you'd like to connect with me directly or want to learn more about investing in real estate, send me a DM on Instagram at @officialchasehudson. Again, we really appreciate you listening, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.